Ep3.
Welcome to the Theater Podcast, intimate, personal conversations with theater's biggest talents. I'm your host, Alan Seals. Today we have a star of stage and screen. You may know him as Bobby from Smash, and even originating Franz and Rock of Ages, Lucas in the Addams Family, and most recently, the incredible Sheldon Plankton in SpongeBob Squarepants the Musical. I have with me today actor, writer, and director Wesley Taylor.
Hello. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for being here. So let's dive right in here. You look very cozy today.
Thank
by
you.
the way.
This is a new sweater.
Born in New Jersey, but grew up in Orlando. What's that story?
Well, my parents met in Nyack, New York, and they sort of moved to Jersey when they had my sister and I, and that lasted no time at all. I was in Elizabeth, New Jersey for a month of my life before they moved us down to Orlando, Florida, which I spent 18 years living in Orlando, Florida. A very strange place to grow up, but I did.
I've got Book of Mormon running through my head now.
Yep, Orlando.
Orlando. Yep. And did your parents live in China? Is that? I've got that here too?
They sure did, yeah. I moved to New York when I graduated drama school, and that's exactly the same time they moved to Xinjiang, China, small town in the middle of nowhere.
Drama school being North Carolina School of the Arts,
Correct.
which I'm very familiar with. That's my home,
Really?
my old stop. Yeah, I grew up in Wilkesboro, North
Oh,
Wilkesboro.
wow.
Yeah,
Cool.
yeah. So I know that area.
Where did you go?
I went to NC State.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. Yeah, so that's
Small
my
world.
past. Yes. You got the performing arts degree, but I guess being in Orlando, is that what got you into musical theater? What made you want to do this?
Definitely not geography. I just had it in my blood. Like, I just had it from a very early age. Before I could talk, I knew that I would get drunk from people's attention. And the sound of laughter at something I said was the most delicious thing I could experience. So I just wanted to replicate that as much as possible and get in front of people as much as possible. And my mom was a music teacher, so she put my sister and I in church, singing for the congregation, singing everywhere. And so my sister was a little shy, and I was desperate for more. And so I was singing all the time, and I was in front of people all the time. And then at 9 years old, I begged my mom to get me an agent. So
Really? That young?
That's right. And so I signed with an agency in Orlando, started going out for commercials and voiceovers and industrials and all these things. And I went to an arts high school across the street from Universal Studios. So yeah, there's a lot of entertainment in Orlando that's conducive to what I wanted to do, I suppose. But no, it was all me. I mean, it wasn't really like my environment that made me. Yeah.
And it's interesting. You said arts high school, like growing up where I did in a small town, the concept of an arts high school, even now as an adult, to me is kind of foreign.
Sure, yeah.
But I guess when you have that many people around, It
was a pretty incredible high school. Dr. Phillips, visual performing arts magnet. And I can't say that at that age, I feel like you're not really learning like a whole lot of extensive, detailed, specific craft. But you are, when you go to an arts school like that, you are exposed to the greats at an early age, which, a lot of people are like, why are you doing Shakespeare? You're 15 years old. How could you ever know what you're saying? And maybe there's some validity to that. But if you don't start introducing the language at an early age, then it doesn't like by the time I got to college and we were doing Shakespeare all the time, I was like a step ahead of everyone else.
Mm-hmm.
So we were doing Chekhov and Moliere and Shakespeare and Ibsen all in high school. And also a rigorous program like that is going to instill a professional work ethic and discipline that is unrivaled at other high schools. We would go on college tours and see all the best acting schools in the country. We would do like 5 main stages a year. We would be doing all these like field trips, going to the Salem witch trial, up in Boston, because we had been studying the Crucible and, so I think it was a pretty formative time in my development as an artist. that school. And then everything sort of fell into place at drama school.
Do you have a tour or a show that you saw at that age that that stands out as like, I know I'm on the right path. I want to be like that.
Yeah. So I had been singing and performing and being in front of people a lot growing up, but I knew I wanted to be an actor, but I wasn't. I think it was more the song and dance man. I was a performance sort of person, and then I was in my sophomore year of English class, Miss Poro, and she's a great teacher. And you do those things where like you're reading a play and Shakespeare. We read a lot more theater than regular English because it was an arts high school. So we were doing Othello, and she was assigning parts to the people in the class to read along, and no one was allowed to read Iago. That was her role that she had to read, and no one could touch it. And truly, when she performed it, just reading the text, I got chills all down my body, and I was just like, I fell in love with acting in that moment, like just watching her work, read the text of Othello, and just like instill it with such specific evil wonder that not only was I like, that's my dream role, but also like I desperately want to be trained, and I want to learn how to do this more than going off and singing and dancing. I want to learn how to be an actor.
Wow. So with the classical training and all of that background, naturally Rock of Ages was a perfect fit. So
Yeah, I have to say, I mean, I was doing Falstaff and Henry IV my final semester of college before graduating, and booking my first show out of college.
6 months out of college.
6 months out of college, I was on Broadway doing a 80s trashy rock jukebox musical that I was actually embarrassed at the beginning to invite my faculty to, because I thought they would, lift their noses to it and look down. And yet, of course, my whole faculty would come and prove me wrong and take me out afterwards and say, this is the work. This is comedy technique. This is, the training applies to every media, every sort of.
Yeah, it makes sense. I mean, comedy is hard. I think comedy is some of the hardest theater you can do.
Yeah.
So to do it well, congratulations. But what was it like? You were 21, 22? 21, making your Broadway debut. Did you realize at that time kind of what that meant? Because
No.
I feel like, coming out of college, you're like, okay, what's my next step? Broadway, done.
Yeah, no, it was like, I don't know. I had this moment a year out of college where all my dreams had come true. Where like the big dreams of college were, I want to live in New York City, I want to be on Broadway, and I want to like be living with someone that I love, like a boyfriend or whatever. And all those things within a year of school were happening, and I sort of had a little mental breakdown. I just was like, oh my God, I guess I'll just die now. Like there's nothing to live for moving, but there's no dreams. There's no, and you have to make new dreams for yourself. You have to, raise the bar higher if you've been lucky enough to achieve some of those goals, so that you always have somewhere to go.
I mean, it was even not only were you on Broadway making your debut, but it was originating a role, which was that much.
Yeah, cast album.
Yeah, cast album, all that.
that.
And so then that was 2009. The next
Tony
year,
Awards.
2010, Tony Awards, all of that. 2010, you went into the Addams Family,
Mm-hmm.
and then you're next to Nathan Lane and BB Newirth.
Who?
I never heard of him. Like, what was that like for you? Obviously, you thought you were at the pinnacle in 2009. You hit 2010, and you
I would like to
step
go
up.
I would love to go back and sort of recreate some of those, some of that experience. Just I was so terrified. I was such a scared kid with Nathan and BB. I just like I grew up watching Nathan and idolizing him, and so it was scary. It was a cast full of titans. It wasn't just Nathan and BB. The supporting cast was Terrence Mann, Carolee Carmello, Kevin Chamberlain, Jackie Hoffman. I mean, it was insane. It was, but that show was a big lesson in expectation, because Rock of Ages was the show that exceeded everyone's expectation and just kept on being the gift that kept giving. We got amazing reviews, unlike what we all thought. We were transferring to Broadway. We were getting nominated for awards. We were like, it lasted for 6 years. No one expected that. This show about white snake songs and poop jokes, no one expected.
Everyone loves poop jokes.
Well, I mean, it's a very smart show. It really is. It's like the template for jukebox, and Jersey Boys, Rock of Ages. Like these are the success stories of jukebox, and that original cast was so incredible. And anyway, the experience of Rock of Ages was so surprising. Whereas Addams Family, I think a lot of expectation went into that project, just with all the names attached, and then the creative team was very fancy. The money that was being poured into the production. And so that expectation can also hurt too, and not live up.
How did that feel?
It was hard. I felt like I was getting my PhD in show business. There was a lot of drama. There's a lot of, we did an out-of-town tryout after all these workshops, and the coldest city, Chicago in the winter. Like my parents were getting divorced. I was going through a breakup. Addams Family, it was tricky. It was trying because I think everyone expected it to be the next great American musical. And it was really struggling to find its voice and its direction and its focus. It's, all of the stuff, all the material that I auditioned with as Lucas, none of those scenes or songs ended up in the show.
Really?
So imagine auditioning for a character and then he's unrecognizable when you're doing it. It was a lot for me to digest. There were some, I'm just like trying not to say the wrong thing. I was challenged and tested by people, creatively, cast, myself. The whole experience was difficult, but I am a better artist because of it, I think. And what's amazing is the legacy of the Addams Family. I mean, the legacy is it's the most produced high school musical like 3 or 4 years in a row. I'm like flown all over the country to coach productions of the Addams Family at high schools.
No kidding.
It's amazing.
Well, that's impressive.
Yeah.
And that ended, it closed in 2010, the same year,
For
right?
a couple years, yeah.
Oh, a couple years? Okay.
Yeah. I did it for the first year on Broadway.
Right. And then in 2012, 2013, of course, went to Smash.
Sure, yeah.
So, I guess during the break, what made you decide to leave Addams Family in the first place, but then how did you get into Smash?
Okay, Addams Family was the longest thing I'd ever done in my life. I mean, Rock of Ages all in all was a year, because off Broadway and on. But Addams Family with the workshops and the out of town and that was a couple years of my life. A year on Broadway. And like I said, I was going through a lot personally, and the show was creatively challenging, and I just felt like I needed to leave, actually. And since I'm an advocate for mental health and talking about mental health, I will just openly admit right here that I experienced anxiety and depression for the first time during that job in a major way. And I had to get on medication, and I had to take therapy, and I had to start meditating, and I had to start really being proactive about my mental health because it was really in jeopardy. And that was during the Addams Family. So I think I needed a break. It also helped that I booked Tales of the City in San Francisco the month before the year contract was over. That was very convenient because I had a job lined up that I was going to go do. No, it's not Broadway. It's not that fancy paycheck, but it was a city I'd never been to with a property I really enjoyed. I loved the books by Armistead Maupin, and this was a beloved character, a gay, iconic character that I was very excited to play. Mouse, Michael Tolliver in Tales of the City. So, yeah.
But then you went to Smash, audition for Smash after that?
Well, was it after? Yes, that was after Tales of the City. Yes.
So I guess as an industry insider question, do you have separate agents to send you for TV versus theater? And because Smash was basically televised theater, was that process any different from a normal TV audition?
No, so you typically, as an actor, you have a legit or theatrical agency
Hmm.
and then a commercial agency. So, like commercials, voiceovers, print, whatever, all that is an agency. A lot of people don't have those, but I have that, which is like where Abrams artists send me out on commercials and voiceovers. And then right now I'm with Innovative Artists as my theatrical representation. And they're the legit. They send you in for TV, film, and theater.
Hmm.
Um, so no, not a different agent for Smash and Broadway. Um, Interesting. That casting was an interesting chain of events because uh, I was moving to Los Angeles. I had made the decision that I wanted to try my luck in sunny LA and be going in for a lot more TV and film. But right before I left for LA, I got this audition from Telsey here in New York City to go in for this new TV show that Steven Spielberg was producing and that the pilot was getting picked up. And, I'd heard, I had of course heard about it, but it wasn't on the air yet. It wasn't, it was just a lot of talk. And so I went in for Sam, which ended up being played by Leslie Odom Jr.
Hmm.
I went in for that role, put myself on tape a multitude of different ways, not to sound incredibly offensive, but I was asked to do it very effeminately, a flaming sort of homosexual. And then I was also asked to do it very masculine, and they thought he's a sportsy guy, and so maybe they want to go in the direction of like very butch masculine, and then they wanted the option of being flamboyant if in case they wanted it. So I was, you know, and then I went to a dance call, and then I moved to LA, and I didn't hear anything for like a couple weeks. Oh no. A week later, I heard that Leslie Odom Jr. got Sam. And I was like, oh, that's a very different direction. But then, like the next day, they said I was on hold for someone who played a dancer in the ensemble who would be recurring only for a few episodes at that time. And that character who originally they wanted African American, now that Leslie was Sam, they were like entertaining me as this character. And then I was on hold for that for a week. And then I was told I got it, which I had just moved to LA. So I'm glad I didn't get a car at that point. I was just renting and I just moved right back to New York.
Wow.
Yeah.
So you were literally in LA for like a week? A week
2
or
weeks.
2? Yeah.
2 weeks, yeah.
That's crazy.
That was the first time I moved there.
Right. So then you've fast forward to Billy Green, right? So,
Yeah,
I guess that's been happening all at the same time.
Billy Green was happening during Addams Family. Addams Family is when Billy Green started. And that's mostly because I was feeling creatively stifled and I needed to do something.
So what is Billy Green, for those who don't know?
Billy Green is a fame horror monster. He's the worst person that you meet at auditions. He's also part of me. He's he's an awful alter ego that I try to stifle, but he is also someone I love. He's a dark cloud inside of me that I know, I'm familiar with, and he's the guy who. A true story. This is a true story. I wrote it into a play, but I auditioned for Juilliard when I was in high school. And I didn't know much about the best schools, but I knew that Juilliard was the best. And so I was like, well, I need to be at the best institution. It's Juilliard or bust. And so I went to that audition in all black, turtleneck, black slacks, black jazz slippers. and I did my 2 monologues, my contrasting classical and contemporary, and they said, do you have anything else for us? And I said, classical or contemporary? And they said, classical. I guess. And I said, Shakespeare, Ibsen, or Moliere. And at this point, they're like getting annoyed. And they're like, Shakespeare. And I'm like, comedy, tragedy, or history. They picked history. I think they were trying to, see the cracks. But I sure did Henry IV. I did Prince Hal on the battle lines. It was just quantity over quality. And I wanted to prove my theatrical prowess, my knowledge of the theater. And I did not get in, thank God. Thank God, because I needed to learn that lesson. And ended up where I was supposed to be, North Carolina School of the Arts, which I love, and I wouldn't change a thing. But that person, that part of me who auditioned for Juilliard and prepared 15 monologues is Billy Green. And so I just tried to exploit that ugly part of me. And it made for some pretty good comedy. And I made sure to include everyone in the Broadway community, all the greats like Audra and Nathan and Kristen Chenoweth and Patrick Wilson. And I just got them all in there. And I don't know how I did that, but I did.
So it's a web series.
It's a web series.
You never actually
said
I'm
sorry.
That.
I'm so sorry. Billy Green is on YouTube. It's a pretty bare bones, like $1.50 operation. We shot it on a point and shoot camera. There's no budget, but it's got heart, and you should check it out.
Do you? I guess. Real quick, we'll back up. Where can they find it on YouTube? Just search Billy Green.
Yeah, I think you just type in Billy Green into the YouTube search. That was before I took it seriously in terms of like video production.
We'll find it. Put it in the show notes for this one. Yeah,
cool.
Do you enjoy writing as much or more? I guess in a different way. How do you enjoy writing versus taking already written material and turning it into a character?
Sure. I love writing, and also I never took myself seriously until about 5 or 6 years ago when I started making money doing it. I always have been a writer. I've always written things down, like sketches or journaling or scripts all the time. And we did these things in college called intensive arts, which was like the students' opportunity to create their own stuff. And my showcase scene, which you usually for your senior showcase, your senior presentation for the industry, casting directors and agents and managers, I wrote my scene, which you're not supposed to do. So I lied and said it was from a book of short plays by Daniel Parker. You've never heard of Daniel Parker? What's wrong with you? But it was a scene that I wrote. And that scene actually was called The Audition. And it was 2 characters, Carson and Billy. And that ended up being the pilot of Billy Green. But again, I was always doodling, writing sketches, things like that for years, and then starting to make web series, and then starting to develop a little bit of a fan base from my web content, and thinking like, oh, I might be good at this. I took playwriting in college as my academic, but I never took it seriously. And it wasn't until It Could Be Worse, which was the web series after Billy Green, where It Could Be Worse was my first venture at a narrative storyline. Because Billy Green, I guess that was connected in a sort of narrative, but loosely. It Could Be Worse was the first time I was like, okay, I'm going to streamline this cohesive narrative with the central protagonist, and I'm going to tell a story. And It Could Be Worse was still very autobiographical, stuff about my life and what makes me anxious and keeps me up at night, and putting that into content. And when we sold It Could Be Worse to Hulu, I said, okay, now I need to take this seriously, I think, because I'm starting to get paychecks for it. So maybe I should study this and practice it daily and keep generating.
And you still do.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we'll get to that. I want to go back to the theater side, and we're fast forwarding now, I guess, to 2016, and we're talking about Sheldon.
Yeah.
Sheldon Plankton.
Yeah.
That little guy. Is that your favorite role that you've done? Is that safe to say?
It's definitely up there. It's definitely like in the top 3 or 4, I'd say, because he was just so deliciously fun, so outrageous. That's like
it's like you couldn't go too big with it.
That's my boyfriend's favorite word for me is outrage. I prefer outrageous to extra, but yeah, no. Sheldon felt like me because he's like this little feisty very active, energized creature who is suffering from a Napoleon complex and likes being teased and humiliated, but also hates it. And there's just a lot of eccentricities about this character that I identify with, which is
SpongeBob.
funny because it's a little green cartoon character.
Yeah.
but-
Oh, it's amazing. SpongeBob, I was going to say, it is still, I mean, R.I.P. SpongeBob. Such a good show. It was still is one of my favorite all-time musicals.
I think out of the 3 Broadway shows I've been in, it was the best show I was in, and it's the least successful, which is interesting.
And there's so many reasons why, which is
Yeah.
another episode for another time. But the character itself, I guess he's a caricature. And it's not your traditional sort of, similar character like Lucas from Addams Family, right? Like there's not a real Sheldon Plankton in real life. Like that could not happen. How do you approach that? You get the script, and how do you start forming this person in your head?
Well, I try to find my way in. I try to find Wesley in it, which, I think goes against a lot of my early preconceived notions of acting, which is that I have to always be a chameleon and transform into, I have to be Daniel Day-Lewis. I have to go to Russia for 2 years and learn how to be a shoe cobbler to play it, which is, I find a little silly now. I try to find my way in. I try to find where I can connect. And so with Plankton, he was ambitious and he was, there's just a lot of things that I was like, oh, I see that and I see that and I see that. And that is what I relate to. And then I would just, try to devour the cartoon because I wasn't really very familiar with SpongeBob. Actually, I sort of missed that boat. I was Doug and Rugrats and Hey Arnold, and
Yeah.
I was a little older than the SpongeBob generation, I think. But so I just started, watching it on YouTube all day long and studying the voice, and it's also like they sort of tailor-made it to me as well. I mean, like someone else played Plankton in the out-of-town tryout. And when it got to Broadway, they added things to the character that would highlight my strengths. And just from a technical standpoint, they added in a dance break in the hip hop. They added a speed rap. They added, this and that. Really fun things that I got to add to the performance.
Well, speed rap is great. I didn't realize that wasn't in the preview
Oh, no.
or the out-of-town tryout. Yeah.
Well, if you listen to the cast album, which was recorded with the cast from the out-of-town tryout, it's not in there.
Yeah, that's a miss. I love that. That was one of my favorite numbers as
it
well.
is a miss, isn't it?
Yeah. Then I guess the question here, there were 6 years between Addams Family and SpongeBob. And we sort of talked about this, but did you go through any sort of reality check after doing the back-to-back roles and then going and finding yourself without a Broadway show for so long? You said
Absolutely.
Yeah.
That was really hard. Yeah. I mean, I was so stinking lucky to have a consistent paycheck every week for 5 years. Like, that doesn't happen for actors right out of college. Like, I was so lucky, and I did it, and I definitely took it for granted. I definitely, I didn't save like I should have. I went from rock to Addams to Smash, and I was like, "Oh, I'm invincible. I'm gonna be on Broadway forever. I'm gonna be employed forever." And so I never saved like I should have. I was living by myself on Central Park West and taking cabs everywhere. I mean, it was just irresponsible. So my hard knocks in the second half of my 20s were important to have. In terms of just financial management. I mean, for the actor, for the artist, financial management is so much of it. And my boyfriend Isaac Powell, who's now starring in Once on This Island, is doing so well, and I'd like to think a lot of that has to do with my influence and my horror stories. So. Yeah, that's a big advice for anyone is to save the money because nothing lasts forever in this business, and you will go through ebb and flow no matter how talented you are or how lucky you are or how in demand you are at a given moment. There will be moments when you're not, and not to say that I didn't work plenty during the second half of my 20s, but you have to understand that when you're doing, guest stars, even like recurs, lots of development for theater, labs, workshops, readings, you're doing concerts, you're doing all these events and things. It's great, but to live off of those paychecks is very tricky, living hand to mouth, paycheck to paycheck. And especially if you've sort of made a name for yourself a little bit and you can't go back to driving Uber or waiting on the producers at the restaurant and stuff. So it's tricky. And you start, you learn how to collect unemployment between each gig. You learn how to this awful cycle of like maybe you accrue some debt and then you get a job and you pay off the debt and then you get it's just I know it's hard. No one said this was easy. So especially when I got to SpongeBob, I really did not take it for granted because I was like, oh, now I'm older and wiser and I know how rare this is. And I know how fortunate that I am right now. And so SpongeBob was probably my favorite Broadway experience, not because, Franz was just a gift to play. That was a stupid Broadway debut. I had an 11 o'clock number. I really took it for granted. It was just an amazing treat to play Franz in Rock of Ages. But for the most part, generally, SpongeBob SquarePants is something that I could really take and appreciate and not take for granted and enjoy and soak it all in.
And as with anything you've been in, the cast just spot on, incredible, amazing. And you've even continued to work, I think, with your friends. You seem to be actually genuine friends with a lot of the people.
Yeah, it was such a great
from
group.
The cast. Yeah,
it's like the most pure cast I've ever worked with.
Yeah,
we loved each other a lot.
And now it's safe to say, correct me if I'm wrong, that you are not currently employed on Broadway.
How dare you?
Do you hate the question, what are you doing now? What's going on? Hey, Wesley, how you been? What are you doing?
Let me tell you something. When an actor is unemployed, nothing gives more anxiety than asking what they're working on, what they got coming up. And yet, everyone does it. Even I'm guilty of doing it to my friends, because, and you don't mean it to be a negative thing. Like you mean it to be like you're just excited about that person's career and you know that they're so talented that they must be working on something else. They must be employed at all times and they must have a million projects lined up. But it's just, it's such a hard thing in between gigs. And I've definitely been in between gigs many times before. So it's just a funny sort of aspect of being an actor. And then it's also this this tricky thing of like, if I am employed, but I haven't signed the contract yet, or it hasn't been announced yet, or we're negotiating the points of the contract, or I think I'm going to do this project, but I have this audition next week for something that will jeopardize it, and I want that more, that kind of stuff. I can't talk about any of that, or I'll lose it, potentially. So that's another thing is you don't want to talk about these things, but you obviously want to provide people with some good news. I don't want people to think I'm sitting on the couch as watching the time go by. I'm a proactive person. I'm a productive. I'm proud of my productivity, and I want people to know that. But at the same time, it's hard because I definitely don't want to be one of those douchebags who are just like, oh, I can't talk about it right now. Like, something's very exciting's in the works, but I can't, I don't want to be that person. And yet I don't want to not give an answer. And I also don't want to deprecate myself to death and like say nothing's going on.
So you know what I'm about to ask, right?
Oh, Jesus. Well, didn't I just give you my answer? The answer is I may or may not have several things going on. A couple things I can't discuss because they're not like totally 100% confirmed yet.
Fair.
Yeah.
Fair.
But I'm enjoying my freedom in going to theater almost every night. I'm going to cabarets. I'm going to my friends' concerts and shows, and I'm getting dinner at reasonable hours, and I'm seeing people that I haven't seen in a long time, and life is fulfilling without a job. I don't need my entire purpose to be defined by the show I'm currently in.
Well, you've also done some modeling for Today Ticks.
Oh, Jesus. Okay.
I mean, that's some good stuff.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks.
And you have pet frogs.
Yes. Well, I'm sort of the stepdad because they're Isaac's.
Oh.
Yeah. But I love them like they were my own.
That's a good answer. You hear that, Isaac?
Yeah.
On the record, he loves them like his own. So cool. We're going to wrap up here with a couple of the standard questions we ask
Okay.
everybody here. So just in general, what motivates you?
Huh. Why did that? Oh, man.
Insert Jeopardy music here.
You know, I am going to see a lot of theater right now because good theater inspires me to do theater. Reading a good book, reading a good script inspires me to write. Seeing an amazing quality cable show makes me propelled to create and write. And I'm inspired by other people. Other people motivate me. Other artists, works of art that touch me and affect me, that resonate with me. That's what motivates me and pushes me to keep going, to tell stories. Yeah, is that okay?
It's great.
Thanks.
There's no wrong answer.
Okay.
What advice would you give to your younger self and younger people listening now starting out down a similar path? And I think you probably already answered this.
I'd say relax, stop taking yourself so seriously, get over yourself, be kinder. Actually, you know what? I would say, I would stop taking yourself seriously, but at the same time, I had this crazy work ethic and discipline that I think, while it's silly and we can make fun of it now, it really did, start a focus in me at an early age that I think was very good. Even though it was myopic, it was like very strong, focused energy towards a common goal. So maybe I wouldn't change that about myself. Oh, I would not quit the piano. That is something that I am so mad at myself that I stopped. My parents made my sister and I practice the piano for an hour a day for about, I'd say I was doing it for about 5 or 6 years. And when I was 11 or 12, they suddenly had this like epiphany as parents that they shouldn't force us to play every day or something. They were like, you can play another instrument if you want to, but you can stop playing. And I, of course, took them up on it because I hated being forced to practice every day for an hour. But it is one of my biggest regrets.
Mine too, actually. I had several instruments my parents let me quit, and I'm like, just saxophone. Why not the saxophone or the violin?
The thing about the sax is the sax a little bit went out of style in terms of like...
Just in terms of reading music.
Oh, I know. No, but the violin could have been very beneficial for you to this day. And I think, if I would play the piano now, it would be so helpful. I could write a musical instead of just plays.
Yeah. I thought you were going to say save your money because that's what you mentioned earlier.
Yes. And save your money.
Yes. And then last question here. If you could only see one show for the rest of your life, but you can see it as many times as you want, what show would you see?
Oh my goodness. That's really hard.
That's the point.
I think one of the best shows in musical theater, a true masterpiece that I connect to and it resonates with me on a deep level forever, is Cabaret. And most of the things that Fosse touched have a special place in my heart, but Cabaret specifically, Candor and Ebb, and the historical context of what was happening tied into like, I don't know, the most brilliant musical storytelling and iconic characters. So I would say Cabaret.
Fair. All right. So on the socials, where can we find you?
On Instagram, I am Sir Wes Tete. On Twitter, I am just Wes Tete. on Instagram, I demand respect. Yeah, I have a Facebook fan page, Wesley Taylor. That's it.
And then on YouTube, search, of course, for Billy
But
Green.
Indoor Boys and It Could Be Worse, which were the last two web series that I've created, are on Vimeo. Or you could go to indoorboys.tv or itcouldbeworse.tv. But yeah, Billy Green's on YouTube.
Wonderful. Well, thank you very much for coming.
Thanks for having me. This was fun.
You can always connect with me at theater_podcast on Instagram and Twitter, or via Facebook at facebook.com/officialtheaterpodcast. And if you could take a moment, also just go rate the podcast, give an honest feedback, and I do read that. So your feedback is very important. You can also connect via email, feedback@thetheaterpodcast.com. I think that's all I've got. As always, thanks to our friends Jukebox the Ghost for providing the music for this podcast. See you next time.
Take a deep breath, make the world a little colorful.